The Parchment Farm presents The Hero's Brother by M. Scott Anderson. Narrated by Mark Bramhall. Maps, illustrations, and support documents can be found online at www.theheroesbrother.com. Connell. 3 years earlier, Connell had carved an eye out of Black Charlie, the land pirate. The next year, on the continent, he received the highest fee ever paid to a mercenary. Just 2 months ago, he amazed the townsfolk by swinging a broadsword from 7 feet away to slash a single white hair from the black beard of a younger brother. Considered by his peers the handsomest man in all the 6 kingdoms of the Isle of Logres, Connell was not satisfied with his native gifts of strength and agility. Through assiduous study, he now surpassed any living man in knowledge of swordsmanship, jousting, and weaponry. Of this he was certain, even though Connell was not yet 24 years old. He had, tragically, never been mentioned by name in any ballad, song, fable, or tall tale. To Connell's consternation, many a song immortalized the exploits of the eldest and most remarkable of his 6 brothers, Alexander Culvert. Whenever Connell walked into any tavern in Corranby, some maudlin tippler warbled one of the 70-odd ballads about his famous brother. Any time he cantered by a hayrick, the herdsman crooned to his cows about some far-fetched feat of Alexander the Greatest. Should Connell confess to a fair maiden that he was Alexander's younger brother, she would just smile wistfully and gaze off into the distance, as if seeing something or someone who was not there. As the rain subsided one afternoon, Connell trotted down a narrow road only to hear someone up ahead singing one of those confounding ballads. At the moment Connell heard the cursed singing, he was leaving the autumnal perimeter of the forest of Broceliande. His horse bore him heavily on the great west road north towards Winfield Keep, his home. If only Lichgate did not lie on the road. After a cheerless, damp fortnight in the dreary Broceliande, ever on the alert against griffins, manticores, and wild men, Connell should have been glad to be just a 2-hour ride from a warm meal and lodging in Lichgate. Should have been. And now this, another song. And look, the fellow's cart took up the whole road. If it wasn't one thing, it was another. When he overtook the carter and saw the lout asking too much of his overburdened horse, blood rushed to Connell's face. If the peasant had been his, he would have thrashed the fellow for mistreating the poor animal. The carter, of course, was still chanting the words to a 2-year-old ballad about Alexander, the crossing of the bridge, which told how Alexander, fighting on the continent for Pope Unguent, had battled his way across a narrow span where 17 knights barred his way. Connell could not thrash the carter with impunity, but he could impede the man's progress. By subtly slowing his horse after surging past the cart, he soon had the rustic off the roadway and in the deep mud. "Go on," grumbled Connell. "Keep singing, but slow down and give that poor horse some consideration." Eyeing Connell's confident carriage and the quality of his sword, the carter obliged him, singing hesitantly at first, and then with more full-throated enthusiasm. When he got to the part where Alexander started slaying foes, Connell cut him short. "I bet you didn't know, my good man, that Alexander only had to kill the first 11 men before the other 6 ran away. The ballad implies he slew all 17, right?" "Dunno, sir," said the carter. "What's more, the bridge was so narrow that only 2 knights at a time could strike him. Did you know that? How come that isn't in your song? That's the exact reason Alexander waited until they reached the bridge to attack them." When Connell had fought Black Charlie and his 2 henchmen, it was on open ground, no bridge to hamper his foes from encircling him, and one of the henchmen was Beanpot Bailey himself. "Never paid much mind to the ins and outs of bridge fighting myself, to be honest, sir. Never needed to." "Course not," snorted Connell. "It's a lost art, bridge fighting is. You know, good carter, it's a shame. This road would have been busier in the old days. said Connell, testing the carter. The road widened, and they could now both amble along at a pace that was more humane for the carter's horse. "You would have had more of an audience for your singing." "It may be so, but Cornby is a fair way safer now than it used to be, sir." The carter had been taught that it was wise to humour the better born, but he had a bit of a contrary nature. After all, it was his cart-horse, and he could do what he pleased with it. "Safer now? Yes, perhaps. But lifeless," said Connell. "Don't you miss all the festivals and carnivals? Lichgate, now that was a town back then. Boisterous." "That's true. No one in Cornby wants to buy their red dye any more. It's all grey and black with the qualm. Bad for my business, that is. Our merchants in Merton still send me to fetch dye from Lichgate now and again, but it's for foreign trade. Lichgate was a sight to see in the old days. I miss the fair and the maypole dancing and the tournaments and all. But all's not lost. There's still a tournament over to Wherechester." "One tournament in the middle of winter, with the wind blowing so hard through your armour that it whistles." Connell left unsaid the complaint he would have voiced to his brothers. Before the qualm, an able younger son could make a pretty penny moving from tournament to tournament, ransoming the defeated foe along with armour and mounts. Connell, it goes without saying, was as able as they come. "I had to spend last year abroad as a mercenary. Only way to keep my knightly skills in fine fettle, now that knighthood is banned in Cornby. Now that I'm home, I think more than ever that it is time for the qualm to go back to the Berkshires where they belong." "If you say so, sir," said the carter. "Begging your pardon, we haven't missed having knights dashing about defending us from the likes of Black Charlie and his land pirates. The qualm put a stop to much of the thieving without the help of knights." Connell could hardly believe it. "You think that the qualm had anything to do with stopping Black Charlie? I know for a fact that it was Alexander's brother, the legendary swordsman Connell Culvert, who made Black Charlie think twice about his marauding. Connell is frequently a great help to Alexander. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about." "I've heard of this Connell and several other Culvert brothers, but they ain't in the songs I know, and I know most of the songs, and Alexander is mainly doing things on his own, single-handed like." "Tell me," said Connell, "do you think your precious Alexander Culvert will be able to get out of his cage single-handedly?" "Cage, sir? Should I know about a cage? I've been away south-east in country since Easter. Haven't heard tell of no cage." "Ignorant fool! The whole world is talking about the magical cage," said Connell. "The cage that the minor mage of Caer Simon put him in." The carter looked nervously down the road. If only he could be on his way singing ballads to his half-dead horse. Connell was not having it. "Here you are singing ballads about Alexander Culvert, and you don't even know he is locked up in a shameful little cage," he said. "Alexander Culvert, his own self? Stuck in a cage? That is news. For 6 weeks he's been there. Mid-August it was. The mighty hero of all those ballads was stuffed in this tiny wooden cage by that good-for-little wizard, the one who styles himself the Magus of Caer Simon. The cage hangs on the topmost branch of the tallest tree in Lichgate. Most humiliating. Even Alexander doesn't know how the old goat managed it. The heaviest weight anyone has ever seen the wizard lift is a pot of usquebaugh. You'll see the tree and the wizard's cage when we get to the centre of Lichgate." The carter felt like he had to ask the obvious question. "Can't Alexander be freed from the cage in the usual way, sir? Pick the lock? Saw through the wood?" "Many have tried, including that famous brother of his, Connell, the one that did for Black Charlie. But so far, my good man, the tiny silver lock and the uncanny wood of the cage have been stout proof against any auger, pick, or saw. Or chisel, curse, charm, nail, key, or talisman," Connell could have added. Freeing Alexander from his aggravating captivity had been Connell's single concern for these last 6 weeks. As his horse lumbered on, the carter took a bite out of an enormous pickle he'd pulled from a stone jar in his cart. Something wasn't right. Not the pickle. It was wonderful. Something else.